Welcome to United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW. Now, here is your host, Kareem Bowen.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. I want to begin today, before we get into the depth of our show. The funniest thing has happened. So I don't have biological children, but I've adopted a number of children. I've raised children. I mean, like from diapers to being able to walk and all those other things. But this latest situation, or this latest stage that I find myself in is very funny. There is a young man that I took under my wing a long time ago, and his father was alive, but not necessarily active in his life. And so I took him in as a son, so I'm kind of like surrogate dad. And Mark is in the stream. Mark, you're out there. We're going to give you a real introduction in just a minute. And you also see Jonathan in the studio stream as well. So it's funny because he now has two daughters of his own. We're talking about Frank and Kimberly and Michaela. And the funniest thing has become the standard of the norm. So they refer to me. Well, Kimberly refers to me, and this is what's funny. Kimberly refers to me as Poppy, right? Poppy. So whenever I come around, she says Poppy. You understand? So it's the most gratifying sound that you could hear when a little kid, you walk in the door and she's excited, Poppy. So as Michaela, who's the younger one, has been growing, we've been trying to teach her to say, okay, my name is going to be Poppy, right? So Poppy. No, she doesn't call me Poppy. She calls me Baba. I'm like, am I a bottle? Like, and I'm thinking like, okay, she's confused. No, Baba. Her dad is Dada. I am Baba. And so this is the funniest thing. So there's a young lady who is a student at Saginaw Valley State University. And we're talking, and she hears the calling Baba. And I was like, yeah, it's kind of interesting, isn't it? And we were talking. I said, doesn't Baba mean something in Swahili? She's like, Baba actually means grandfather in Swahili.
Oh, yeah.
She's a child prodigy. Who knew? So one calls me Poppy in English, and the other uses Swahili terms, Baba, which we still are trying to figure out how that happened to be, the reference. So I thought it was really funny. I want to welcome to the stream. As you see, we have Mark Bassett all the way out there on the sunny shores of California. He has a swimsuit photo shoot today. We'll talk about that in just a minute. And also John being the place to be the producer.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going? It's quiet on the set. All quiet on the set. It's good.
All right.
For dramatic effect.
For dramatic effect.
Yeah.
Hey, I don't want to burst your bubble about the prodigy, but we had a similar situation where, one of our kids started calling me something and the other one couldn't get that phonetically, so it became something else. So I don't want to burst your bubble, though. So.
Well, they don't speak Swahili. That's all I'm gonna say. Okay. But anyways, it was funny. But so Mark, this morning when we came into the studio before we got on air, Mark was telling us, he's been working out and bodyboarding and probably boogie board and all kind of board and surfboard and all that other stuff. Out on the waterboard. Oh, not waterboarding. All of these other boards on the West Coast, right? So we come in the studio today. He says, hey, well, I've got a photo shoot going on today on the beach. They come out and do. So I'm thinking like, dang, like, are you a part of the 60 and sexy, Mark? Like what magazine is this? Is going to be Fitness Magazine?
AARP.
Going to be in the calendar.
AARP calendar.
Oh my God. So anyways, so I come to find out that he was actually talking about there being an actual photo shoot on the beach, but he's not a part of it.
I'm not part of it. Unfortunately, I've got my binoculars out every so often checking it out, but other than that I'm not a part of it. So
yeah, no. So that was very interesting. It was a funny situation. But hey, this is the first time that the crew has gotten together. So I want to say to you guys, thank you all. We are the team has won. We won for best show. Is it reoccurring? What is it?
Best regularly scheduled personality, or team.
Yes.
From the Michigan Association of Broadcasters for Radio Market 2.
Yes. Which is
What's
basically
Radio Market 2? Where is that?
well, it's basically everything outside of Detroit.
Well,
Okay.
yeah, kind of. It has to do more with size of market.
Yeah.
So we're competing with people from Grand Rapids, Kalamazoo, similarly sized. I think Ann Arbor is in our.
Yeah, because there's also a
Other than
3 and a 4.
Detroit, all the other major metropolitan areas outside of Detroit. Basically.
Pretty much.
Yeah, because everything is just 3 and a 4 as well. So
Well, we got to go for a repeat now.
and Jonathan also won a number of awards. Well, I'm gonna tell you what was cool about this award. Someone that we consider, we're big fans of, Art Lewis, who has been in this place forever. It's crazy, but as it would have it, we find ourselves going toe to toe with Art Lewis. And so I was kind of like, okay, let me look good at least when I go down here, because so I could at least look good and congratulate Art. And when they said United Shades of Gray, I was blown away, guys. It was really a fun opportunity, and Art was, of course, the consummate gentleman. There is the award.
Wow.
You see it right there. So much fun.
Yeah.
John, I always see now. Oh, you're trying to. So actually, they could see it better without your hand there, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, they could see it
He's
better.
got the blue sweatshirt.
Because you got a blue shirt on.
Yeah, WSGW needs to be concerned about retaining Jonathan if he got 3 awards.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan is producing. He's getting stuff for grain mill spills over and helping cows across creeks. He's
Jonathan,
doing all. No, just.
I think you need to walk in and ask for a raise, my man. So
I just want to say congratulations, guys. This is what's fun about this is that we actually enjoy doing the show with each other. It's fun. We do, have some challenging conversations, but it is always a good time to come in and Mark with his very. So I found out the awards. Let me change this. So I just the BEA awards. I can't believe, and the B goes to the BEA goes. To, I'm like, what is the BEA? But it stands for Broadcast Excellent Award, right?
Broadcast Excellence.
Yeah, they should have probably said that in all of the things. I'm like, what's a B? Am I going to get a B? Like, what is it? Oh. But it was funny. But anyways, it was a great time. Thank you all for continuing your listenership, both here at WSGW and WJOL. And anyone else who would like to just pay attention to what we're bantering about. Let's get to it. Since we're talking about what's hot off the press, I also want to talk the solar eclipse. What did you catch out there in sunny California?
Nothing.
Nothing.
No, it wasn't really out here. You couldn't really see it out here.
Yeah, I took 24 hours driving all over the state of Michigan to find these stupid solar glasses for kids. And when I got them, I was like, okay. I mean, it was cool. I could see the moon move in front of the sun.
Yeah.
But it was I was waiting for it to get dark. I'm like 95%. It should get pretty dark. And it was just kind of like a hazy shade of gray.
Yeah.
I was like, wow, okay, that was anticlimactic.
As a kid in Hawaii, we had one of those and we went out and watched it. And it's kind of like a little bit of Much Ado About Nothing in a certain sense, but I don't get into those things.
But the images, my cousin was down in Texas. She was in El Paso, Texas.
Yeah.
And wow, I mean, it was completely dark, and her images were way better than what ours were that we experienced. Yeah. So I was like, well, if we get 20 some years again, August 23rd, 2024 is when the next one. It's actually a day after my birthday, so maybe I'll take the trip out to Montana, North Dakota, or South Dakota, so that I can be in totality range. So I don't know. It's funny. It only gets dark at 100%. Thank you, Mr. Sanders, for sharing that with us. But I want us to really get into our conversation on today, because I think that we have a very interesting one. We're going to talk about the problematic relationship that exists between Black communities, people of color, and the police officers. And I want to share with you guys where this came from. I had this crazy situation the past couple of days. I happened to pick up my phone, and my phone was on some social media platform, and there was someone that was going live. So I don't know how I ended up directly in this live stream, but it was midnight or really dark at night, and they're like, hey, we're going to be nosy. And there's two two state boys that are in the city of Saginaw, and they're videoing this thing take place, and you can hear the people screaming. And the police, they're screaming back and forth. And so I'm going, dang, what's going on? And so in my mind, and I think that the person that was recording could like hear and feel my vibes. He's like, "Oh, you guys want me to get closer?" I'm like, "How did you know that?" "Of course we do. We're nosy." So he gets down there, and what happens? I guess there was a traffic stop, and in this traffic stop, there was a girl driving, I guess, and there was a male passenger, and the residents came out of the house. So by the time he gets down to where this is, which is a block or so, the residents are down and they're yelling at the police, the state police, like, "Why are you manhandling her?" So I guess they took the girl out the car. They put her arms behind her back, and they say her fingers were almost up to her head. I could imagine that would be very painful. But this is what was going on. But this is, I've seen this before. People are angry. They're yelling. It's late. I don't know if anybody had any liquor with the situation, but they were mad because the police officers were roughhousing the individuals that they were pulling out of the car, which they seem to be cooperating. But the problem was this: there was a guy that came into the sound of the camera, and you could see his back, and he begins to argue, like, "Yeah, you shouldn't be doing this." And he says this. He says, "That's exactly why that happened to your partner. I bet you didn't appreciate the way that they treated your partner." The state police officer who was recently hit and run over. Was it a drive-by?
No, he was hit by
Not
a
a drive-by,
suspected
but
drunk
a
driver.
hit and run is what I meant.
It was a suspected drunk driver. Yep.
Suspected drunk driver. And so he says this, and the person's recording like, yo, chill out. Like, if this is your argument that that they're mishandling them, take notes, do the video, but this is not the place to make that argument, which I was thinking like, wow, somebody in this crowd has some sense.
Mm-hmm.
And the kid continues to go. And so he yells it. And this time when he yells it, the police, one of the officers heard it, one of the state boys. Now there's like 5 off state boy cars out there. Yeah. And there's maybe a dozen or so people that are standing on the side of the road. And one of the officers stops what he's doing. Well, I mean, there's 2 people and there's 5 police cars. So we have some freedom to do other things here. And one of the state boys, he then comes over to the curb where the young man was standing on the sidewalk. And he was like, "Go home." He's like, "I'm not doing anything. I can videotape. I'm not going home." And he says, that's why you're out here doing to these kids. That's why they ran over your partner. And that's why they ran over him dead, which I thought like that was like cruel and insensitive.
Mm-hmm.
And even so the officer then said, "What did you say?" And he turns back around. He approaches the guy. "What did you say?" He said, "You heard what I said." He goes, "What did I say?" "No, if you're a big tough man, say it again." And the state police officer starts to get into an argument with the civilian who, I mean, was it rude? Was it stupid? Was it insensitive? All of the above.
Yep.
But Mr. Officer, whoever you are, bald head state white guy, state officer for the state of Michigan, state police, come on. Like,
don't take the bait.
You cannot take the bait. And so it just got me thinking, like, how many times do we, and who knows what you got going on, right? You're on your job is high stressful. I get it. You got all of these things going on. Who knows? Maybe you got situations at home, but you cannot.
You're not well paid. On top of that, you're not especially well paid.
Right. Yeah, you're not sitting there. I mean, you don't come to work to have your emotions toyed with, right? I mean, because it may have been a friend or a family. Well, who knows?
Yep.
But the fact of the matter is, and it was I was really kind of concerned because he turned around very aggressively with his hand on his weapon and was asking him, "What did you say? Say it again." "No, say it again, big tough guy." And he starts engaging him. Now, considering the situation and the things that have happened in our community for a long time, this was not a good look. And for the state officer that was out there, if anyone hears this or refers them to this, brother, I'm going to tell you, go get some therapy, talk about it. You got to decompress at the end of the day, but you cannot allow what some 20-year-old kid is yelling at you in poor taste to pull you out of your frame of mind when you're doing the work. So when that happened, I just be kind of like, okay, this is crazy. But then there were all of these other things that were coming to play. And as it so happened that everything landed on today, that today there's also there are a couple of police cases that are out there. And then something that happened in Chicago that I want to talk about with Mr. Reed that I really want to begin to share. So I want to get into this conversation about why is there such a problematic relationship between police officers and I'm not going to say community colors, I'm going to say Black communities, because there tends to be a real propensity for these two groups of folk to continually finding themselves in engagement. So are you guys understanding what it is that I was saying before?
Yep.
All right. So for those of you, do you have anything to say, first of all? What are your thoughts in terms of the police, the state guy?
I know that's been an ongoing conversation, at least here in Saginaw, is the state police partnership. On the one hand, the police department is arguably understaffed and can't handle just everything that's going on. So I understand the reason behind the partnership. On the other hand, there's arguments of these are people that live outside the community, that come from outside the community, that are expected to come in and solve the community's problems, or at least help with it. And I think I don't know for sure. Right. It's a hypothetical. I think the reaction from the officer might have been different if the officer lived in the community and was part of the community. It was a terrible, insensitive thing to say, and I think police do need to be held to a higher standard when it comes to that kind of conversation. But that living and working in the community are sometimes two different things in that regard.
You know what? Go ahead, Mark. Were you going to say something?
No, go ahead.
Well, because I think about it, like, Mark, you have been a corporate leader.
Yep.
You've been a corporate leader before. I'm a leader in a variety of capacities. But I can never step off of my leadership bubble in the heat of the moment, my platform. I can't take that title down in the heat of the moment. If you have a worker that is insubordinate and they call you you can't sit there and start going toe to toe in front of other workers and calling them names back and talking about their work performance or any of those things. And so when I hear this and when I think about this, it challenges me to really think there's a situation here that exists. And I thank you bringing up, Jonathan, the fact that in most communities, and what they're really trying to do, hopefully with the police department in Saginaw, is really put folks who are from the community. We're seeing more folks that are around the community, or at least familiar with the community, that are now being hired by the police department. That's one good thing. State boys are state boys, and most of them aren't coming from the city of Saginaw or any city whatsoever. And they become state boys because they're out in Frankenmuth and Hemlock and all of these rural areas, and they're sent to police in the city of Saginaw. Now, you cover the news, Jonathan. So in terms of, are they understaffed as it relates to the police department here in the city of Saginaw?
That's the department's position, is that the partnership with the state police is to cover deficiencies that the department faces.
Okay, so we're going to have a conversation. Go ahead.
And I do want to mention, state police also have a lot of resources and equipment and specialized units and things that local municipalities really can't put together, whereas the state police have this. I almost think that if you could separate the everyday patrol from that, there might be some benefit there. But
there's a problem that exists, because this is the thing, right? If it's just having enough officers in our community, that's one thing. But I don't know about me, and I don't know about those who are listening. If you can put it in the social media stream, we would love for you to do so. There seems to be an overwhelming presence of state police officers, like, in the city of Saginaw. If you go to the city, and this was this Monday night, Tuesday, something like that. If you go to the city of Saginaw, like Thursday through Saturday, you see more state police officers than you do city police officers. And it's not the city police officers that are pulling people over, it's the state police officers. So there's an interesting situation that's taking place here that's out of balance. But I want to get to the meat of this conversation. If you guys that are listening would just give us an opportunity to set this up so that we can really engage in this conversation, I greatly appreciate it. Okay, so as we look at this entire situation, and those of you listening from WJOL and WSGW, thank you for continuing your listenership from your respective places. So this is the thing. So there is a situation that took place on March 21st in Chicago, Illinois. We understand Chicago's had all kinds of issues as it relates to police and officers in the community, right? So there was a seatbelt violation is the reason why this black man was pulled over in Chicago. And what ended up happening was on this 26-year-old Dexter Reed, and they're just getting to this because he was laid to rest recently. His name was Dexter Reed, 26 years old. He was headed out, as he told his mother, Sheila Banks, I'm headed out to take a ride. He had just bought a new, I think, a used SUV, white SUV, and he was going to take it out for a ride. This entire situation ends with Reed being dead after the police shoot 96 rounds in 46 seconds, 96 shots in 41 seconds. And this is per the civilian COPA is what it's called, but it's basically a civilian task force to keep police officers, in check. These were tactical officers that were in an unmarked car in plain clothes that pulled Reed over for not wearing a seatbelt. Now, I saw the vehicle, and the vehicle's windows were tinted. So, I mean, they were almost black. I can't see in my Jeep with the tinted windows when it gets too dark, but these windows were like almost black. The officers alleged that Reed fired first. When they were investigating from the film, they were saying it was kind of difficult to determine who shot first. So we go, we side with we err to the side of the officers in most cases, unless we can prove otherwise. Reed rolls down the driver's side window. There's a female officer. I saw the video that said, hey, roll down the window. He rolls down the driver's side window. When he rolls it down, you see Reed's face, and he has on a mask. The first thing I was thinking, like, oh my gosh, he's getting ready to commit a crime with a ski mask on. You see his eyes and his mouth. He's talking. But then I thought, this is March in Chicago, so it's cold outside. And then he refuses to roll down the other windows of the car or unlock the door, as he's being told by these plainclothes officers who got out of their vehicle with guns drawn. You gotta watch the video. And then what we see is Reed's body. They start shooting. We hear gunshots. Somehow Reed, as the officers are retreating around trees to give themselves some protective cover, somehow Reed gets out the car, and he falls at the back of the car, and he's on the ground, motionless. And then you hear these final three shots while he's laying on the ground. And, there's a frenzy that takes place. The officers are going crazy. When we look at these types of situations, and so, of course, the family is now working with civil rights attorneys saying, hey, this was improper. The police department is saying, look, the dude shot at us first, so we're shooting back at him. This particular case, I think, illuminates something. And I'm interested in what your thoughts are, both of you. I am a black man. You guys are white men. We can see that very obviously. But is there a difference in terms of how we're processing or how we see this information? Because this particular situation is one that I have been saying for a long time, that there is black officers. Officers interfere or interact with black folks more often at a rate of 3 times that their interaction with white individuals. And when I look at this guy was being pulled over for a seatbelt enforcement by a tactical armed group of individuals who are not your normal community policing team. They're a tactical team. The windows were tinted. And what I'm asking you all is, when you see this, do you see that maybe there is a propensity when we look at the legal and the law enforcement police officers? We're going to take a quick break in just a second, but is there a propensity or is there targeting, or are these issues that we need to take a look at as we look at how oftentimes black folks have these interfaces, especially in traffic stops, with white or black police officers? Because someone in our social media stream says black officers do it too. It's a presumption of a guilty presence, even when there has not been the evidence of a crime that has taken place. I want us to really pull this thing apart. We're going to talk about this in the second half of our show. If you're listening via social media, like, tag, and share this with your friends as we get into this conversation. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more United Shades of Gray.
You're listening to United Shades of Grey on WSGW.
This is Kareem. We're back with more United Shades of Grey. Before the commercial break, I began to lay out this conversation of what's taking place in Chicago on March 21st is when it actually took place. They laid to rest the body of one Dexter Reed, 26-year-old, that had this encounter with the police officers. So I want to just kind of open it up so that we can begin a conversation, some dialogue about what we're thinking. What were your initial thoughts, gentlemen, concerning this particular situation that we laid out here?
Well, I mean, I'm not proud to say it, but to me, it was just, this is just another example of excessive force for this. Again, I wasn't there. I don't have all the details, but what appears to be on the surface excessive force for the situation. And so in a certain sense, you see these multiple times a year, and in a certain sense, you kind of get numb to it. And which is, I'm not proud to say that, but that's kind of the reality, like a number of other issues for me. I think, to your question, I think this is just me and everybody's different. I come from I historically believe in institutions, and I typically believe that police have done something for a good reason initially. Whether they have, or that doesn't mean that that's always the case, but I always jump to the assumption initially that they had a right, there was a reason they did that. I also think I saw it from one of your readers that popped up quickly, that there's a certain presumption of guilt rather than presuming innocence. And I think, there is a certain amount of bias that goes on that, if you're pulling over someone that's of color, that there's a higher likelihood that there's going to be an issue here, whether that's a racial thing or it's just bared out by, statistics, and they're letting statistics bias them. I'm not going to judge that.
Okay. What about you, John?
I think when we look at this instance or instances like it, where in this instance, it was a bunch of plainclothes officers hopping out of an unmarked car with weapons drawn. What are they doing making a traffic stop? In other instances, it's a no-knock warrant sometimes with plainclothes officers. When you're talking about people that are not clearly identifiable as police officers in an instant, I saw some of the body cam footage and stuff, and these officers had on vests that had like a white sheriff's department or police badge or something, but they didn't have their badge. They weren't. It takes a little bit to recognize that they're an officer or that they could be an officer. If 4 people with weapons drawn come running up at your car, that immediately puts you on in the defensive state. I'm surprised he rolled down his window to begin with.
I wouldn't have.
It would have taken me a minute, and I don't know. But at the same time, when we look at these instances and we extrapolate them to this is how police interact with black people. No, this is how, in this instance, it was done poorly.
And I would agree with you. I don't think that this is the standard way that officers, and mind you, one of the officers was shot. So there was a gunshot supposedly that they said came from the car. One of the officers was supposedly shot in the arm, is doing well, and he happened to be an African-American officer. Someone said in the stream that black officers are not removed from being a part of it. They're not immune to it. Absolutely. And I think it's true. So I think that if we can see officers doing this, there is just, and honestly, when you look at law enforcement bodies, they're made up of more white folks than there are black folks. Unless you're in a seriously urban community in a particular area. But
real quick,
we had the case in Memphis where it was a bunch of black officers, basically, I forget what city it was a year or so ago.
Memphis is real black these days.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I do want to finish my thought, though. When we look at it especially from a media perspective of highlighting these cases and even unintentionally extrapolating them to this is how police interact with black people, it creates fear and it creates more defensiveness right off the bat, I think, in these interactions.
Okay, well, I think I understand what you're saying, but
Yep.
when I look at this particular situation, one of the things that comes to mind is what many African Americans have been saying for a very long time. Oftentimes in a situation, and this one is different because I mean it's extreme, right? But oftentimes what we hear folks in Black community, like, why are we being pulled over? You'll see someone get get pulled over, and their question is, officer, why did you pull me over? And people are like, well, you should just, do what he says and give him your license. But the question often becomes, why in this situation? It's obvious. You couldn't see inside the car. From the video, did you see the video? And you saw how dark the windows were. You could not see inside this vehicle. So how are you then? You can find a reason after you pull me over to justify what it is that you're doing. But the question becomes, why am I being pulled over, right?
Usually, again, in my experience, it's hard for me to have this conversation because I have a much different experience, obviously.
Okay.
Every time I've been pulled over, they actually walk up and explain why I'm like. One time I was surprised I didn't turn on my left blinker, so he pulled me over for not turning on my left blinker, but he explained that as as I opened the window.
Wow,
so I'm surprised they don't explain it. So.
Well, Mark, you know what? What's funny is this. I was here in Saginaw Township, and I've had great experiences with some township officers. This particular time, I got pulled over by a police officer right on it was Himmeter and near Shattuck, right around the corner from the police station. This officer, who was not in the view of where I was. I'm standing at the thing. I see the light. It's getting ready to turn. It was green when I went under, but it turned yellow as I was underneath it, right? I get pulled over. You ran through the light. I'm like, dude, you weren't even at the intersection. The officer said, oh, I was at the intersection. No, you weren't. You're lying. And so what happened is that when he pulled me over, I was like, hey, officer, what are you pulling me over for? Give me your driver's license and your registration. I was like, well, I'm just, asking what's the reason. I don't have any reason. I'm not going to fight you on this, but I just want to know, why are you pulling me over? And then so he just gets my information and he comes back. And when he comes back, he says, I pulled you over because you ran through the red light. I said, sir, I didn't run through the red light. And he started getting, well, you should know this. And he started giving me a lecture. Well, his body the officers were looking at the chief looked at the information from the very start before he pulled me over. And he said, you're absolutely right. The way that he handled you and the things that he said to you were inappropriate. It was not how we train our officers. And so I was thankful that he had actually taken time to look at it. But these are the types of encounters over and over again that folks in Black communities are having with police officers, and it's problematic. And so this one is different just because of the fact, I think that in this situation, you see that one of these officers did not have any reason. They said that later they found a gun in his car. I would assume that if someone was shot, one of the officers was shot, then there would be a gun in his car, right? And I also agree with the fact that if you shoot at officers, come on. If you shoot at officers, you should expect to get some rounds fired back at you. But it comes back to this idea of what is the purpose of police officers being put into communities? How do you see police officers, or what is the role of an officer as they enter into a community? Just a regular police officer, I guess.
Well, it's public safety. It's under that umbrella. It depends. I think that police officers should have specific roles. I like the idea of the community police officer who's just there to be in the community and to know what's going on. There are police that are there for traffic specific violation or for patrol, but mostly traffic related stuff. And then there's kind of the heavier stuff, the shootings, the heavier investigations, break-ins, stuff like that.
Task
forces.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I don't have intimate knowledge of how policing works.
No, but my thing is this, and this is and this is why I thought that this was so very interesting, was that in certain communities, I believe that the police do what is on the outside of the car, which is to protect and serve. They are there as a community officer, as a policing officer. One time I got trapped in a downpour rain, and I was running by these white man businesses. That's what I'm saying. I started running by these businesses, and I saw the officer pull in. My initial thought was like, oh man, this dude is thinking I'm trying to rob these white men businesses. and it was right around the corner from my home, right? And so the officer, I was really shocked. I can't remember his name in the moment, but he's pulled me over and he just said, "Hey," he says, "Dude, you're in the rain. Would you like a ride home?" And it was so different than what I had anticipated because of my previous interactions. And so he gave me a ride home. He's like, "Man, stay dry." And I thought that was like that was cool, but that is not the normal interactions that I have. Even as someone who is educated, degreed, I'm a pastor, I'm a community activist, I'm in the community doing things. I get pulled over by officers and disrespected in many reasons by folks who are far less educated, far less concerned about my community because they think that they have a badge and they have the right to teach or treat and talk to me however they want to. And in this particular situation, I think there's a real problem. And Chicago has had a long problem with these incidences. As a matter of fact, in 2019, I think the federal government said, "Look, you got to go in here and you got to change the way your operating procedures for your police officers because this isn't working." We know that Chicago has a serious gun violence problem. They have a lot of guns on the street and a lot of violence that it relates to guns. But the reality of it is, if you're not comfortable or safe, it comes with the job. If you don't feel comfortable and you can't handle this job, then this ain't the place for you. But how can you, as a tactical team, then go from tactical to then doing routine police stops on the side of the road and say that the guy wasn't wearing a seatbelt when you can't look into this car? And it was really clear you couldn't see into the car. But then just the excessive use of force after the man is down on the ground. Then you take the last 3 shots. Did you see the last 3 shots, Jonathan?
I did not.
Okay. He's on the ground laying at the back of his vehicle. I don't know how he got out. I don't know how he wasn't dead inside the car. But he gets out and he's laying on the ground. He's lifeless. And one of the officers, who looks like he's probably about 20 to 30 yards away, 20 to 30 yards away, takes 3 final shots. Boom, boom, to make sure he's dead. I'm like, the purpose of shooting an individual in that situation is to make sure that they are no longer a threat. If someone is laying face down back to you, what kind of threat do they offer? So I think that there's a real issue. And I think that this brings to light an argument that we've had in communities of color for a long time. So that is one thing. And it just so happens, and I want to bring up this other situation. And like I said, my uncle, my uncles, cousins have all been police officers. My uncles and other cousins and a number of my uncles have all been in the military, paramilitary situations. So I'm not like the defund the police person. I'm not that dude. But I do think that there is a real issue with how folks in color, in communities of color, particularly Black folks, have interactions with police officers and how those things often end up in death. Whenever we're having these conversations, it's not white men, it's not Polish men, it's Black men that are on the other.
Well, I guess my question to you would be that,
yeah,
and I don't want to divert us into a
no, go ahead.
But my guess is there are an equal number, obviously a lower percentage, but there are multiple cases of people of other races and colors having very similar experiences.
No, I would agree that there are other cases, but proportionately, it's almost. I think they were saying that the engagement is almost 30% higher for folks.
Yeah, I actually looked it up.
Yeah,
death by shooting by police. It's about 1,000 people a year in the United States. It's twice as many whites as Black, but on a relative basis, it's twice as many Blacks as whites. Basically,
yeah. 12, you're talking about 12-13% of the population,
right? Exactly.
The majority.
So while the sheer number is more of white, from a percentage of the population, it's twice the percent Black versus white who get shot by the police.
So my question is, why do you think this exists? What is and I'm I could stand on a soapbox and say but I'm curious.
Well, I was going to ask you, what do you think the solution is? And I want to, I would go down a different path of taking race out of it. It's just why.
But you can't take race out of this, Mark. You can't.
Well, no, time out. Let me finish the thought. Whether it's a Black person, a white person, Hispanic person, or an Asian person, anytime excessive force is used or police misuse their power, it's wrong. And
Absolutely.
so is this, what is causing this? Is it a lack of training, a lack of quality of personnel that you have in the police force? And so, ultimately my question starts to become, why are these things happening, and what is the solution? Obviously I don't know. I'd love to get an expert in here. And so, but I think it's a combination of training and the capability of the people that are potentially a decent percentage of the workforce that are in the police.
Okay, what are you saying?
I think a huge part of it is lack of accountability. There are so many laws and mechanisms in place to protect officers that mess up. And we have seen investigations recently, locally, go against the officers.
Absolutely.
Officers being charged and convicted of.
But those are
various
cases
things.
when there's usually video available.
And there's usually video, there's usually more proof. It takes a lot to get something like that done. There's qualified immunity. There are other mechanisms in the practice of policing that themselves tend to cause more of these issues. I mentioned no-knock warrants. I talked about plainclothes police officers doing routine stuff. That's probably going to cause more of a problem than just leaving it be for now, because we don't have... I wouldn't say they're going into it looking for a confrontation, but if it's more likely to cause a confrontation, that should be part of their thought process.
But if you think about it, if my experience, and this has been historically what I've experienced, I'm going in with the understanding of this is what's getting ready to happen in this stop. So I'm going to be already prepared. Like, oh, here they come with the foolishness again.
Yep.
And that's typically what happens. Now, one of the things that happened on the incident that I was telling you about that I was watching on social media was that the young black man continued to say, listen, until we stop them and we stand up and don't allow them to, because someone said, no, take it to the police station. No, we have to stand up here and we have to demand that they treat us with respect, which means that they kill us. They treat us with respect until we stand up as a community and don't allow this to happen. Is going to continually happen. I do think that there is and some of it is training. Some is training. Some of it is lack of cultural understanding. Some of it is that we got white folks in black places that are policing us and not protecting and serving us because they're afraid of us. And I think that a lot of the issues that have surrounded, I, as a black man growing up, I grew up in a community that was non-homogenous. Most of it was white. I know how white people act. I understand to a great deal how the majority of them think because I lived in those spaces. What does not happen is that many of the officers that are protecting and serving don't have the opportunity to be in spaces where they truly understand how black people act. And I said this before, and you all didn't agree, but I think that there is a fear among white people, and I think in some places it may be very latent, that black people are looking for an opportunity to get even with them because of the atrocities that have existed. And I think that slavery was a great example of the fear that a black man projects in white communities. He thinks that we want your woman, we want your house, we want you. And those are none of the things. So I think that there is a need for not only training, we got to deal with the issues of bias, cultural competency. When an officer is hired into a community that does not look like him, he needs to have some cultural competency training.
But so if you take Saginaw, let me ask you, I mean, it's a large black, large Hispanic community. I think in total 30%. Sounds like it's an understaffed police department. I mean, I'd like to think you could begin to, I mean, it all comes back to money. But why can't Saginaw get a police force that looks like Saginaw, as an example?
That's a real. I'm not gonna say what I was getting ready to say. That should be on my other show, Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen. It's a little too straightforward. And I'm not gonna say it because, yeah. Anyways, what I'll say is this: that it's in the process, and this is where somebody. You were saying, Mark, that you respect the systems that exist, and I agree. Yep. I mean, I like to bring myself to say that I can sincerely depend on the systems to do what are necessary. But in so many cases, as a black man, seeing situations that the systems have failed people in my community. I struggle at times, and I often wonder how this is going to turn out. Now, the thing that has turned the tables has been the fact that iPhones and Androids and video phones, there is video almost of every encounter that takes place now. And so it brings to accountability individuals. Well, it brings to a greater level of accountability, or gives us the opportunity to be held accountable, because now there's video. Otherwise, most folks err to the side of police officers. Yeah. White America tends to err to the side of, if the police officer did, there's a reason why he pulled you over. And that is a presumption of guilt. Black folks err to the side of the, like, what are these police officers doing to harass another black man? And that comes from that historical relationship that black men, police officers, were created for the purpose of policing, not protecting and serving black communities from the very onset. And education and changing in policies have not changed from the time that Jim Crow has come to an end. Yes.
You just gave two different points of view. One is what you called the white people point of view, saying, well, the police must have had a reason for pulling you over. The other is black people assume that it's just for harassment. Do you think one is more correct than the other?
Well, I think that living as a black man, I think that the white America is, not all of white America, but much of white America is oblivious to the treatment that many blacks have in their communities. And so in my experience as an educated black man who does right by his community, absolutely. I think that there is a greater, I've experienced more negative encounters where even I've had to bite my tongue and deal with it later, because I will write the report. I will call your police officer.
And I think,
chief.
I think that is good.
Yeah.
That's the accountability part. The point of my asking that question is it's probably closer to somewhere in the middle.
Well, I couldn't tell you that because my experiences have not dictated that. Now, you can say that based upon, statistics and numbers, but until you've been riding in the hood, come chill with us and sit in the back seat and then get that experiential. I think that most people feel that way. I think most of white America thinks that, for some reason, black people are calling, saying wolf, crying wolf, and that it doesn't happen. And there's a reason why you're being pulled over. But that often is not the case. And until we continually have situations. So we got 1 minute and 53 seconds. This is not something we're going to end. But I want you guys to pay tribute to something, or pay notice to something that is also taking place. Today, they're also putting charges. They're charging the officers, the 6 officers that were part of
charging or sentencing.
They're sentencing. Excuse me. Thank you for correcting me. They're sentencing the officers that were part of the Mississippi Goon Squad, where they sexually assaulted with dildos. Where do you even get this stuff? But this was premeditated. They sexually assaulted the 2 African-American men after breaking into their house and kicking in the door, urinated in their victim's closet, put a gun in one of their mouths and pulled the trigger, blew the side of his mouth out while he was sitting there bleeding. They went outside to kind of figure out, okay, what is the story that we're going to tell? They planted a gun. And this is the other thing. Because if the man took one shot and all of these shots happen and he gets up and he's able to walk out, why didn't he shoot more times? So there's a fear in black communities that, hey, they'll plant drugs, because we've seen it happen. And we don't pull these things out of the air, but these are things that we really need to deal with. I want to thank you guys for tuning in this conversation. And Mark, you said something a long time ago when you first came in. He's like, there is no upside for a white man like myself having these conversations, but there is an upside, because I think that as the ward shows, when we have these courageous conversations, it gives an opportunity for people to hear their perspectives and what they're thinking about, and sometimes have those things challenged. So I want to thank you and Jonathan both for being brave and courageous as we have this conversation. And those of you in the social media stream, we want you to like, tag, and share this conversation with other folks. Not only we want you to share it, but we want you to have conversations with people surrounding these issues. This is Kareem signing off. God bless you all. Grace and peace.